Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Reality Check Podcast. Tonight I'm joined by going on day 12 out of a 30-day fast, Marcus, and by Raul Mas. And I want to mention also that today is Tuesday the 13th. Now, in the American culture, that doesn't mean a damn thing. But in the Latin culture and the Hispanic culture, we don't do Friday the 13th. We do Tuesday the 13th. And there's these little sayings, even don't get married, don't take a trip, don't do this or that or the other. There's a little ditty, which I will not, burden you with, especially because I don't know it exactly. But because we're in America, I'm not worried and I haven't heard any sounds of Jason or anything. So I think we're ready to go. Tonight's topic is how the loss of Venezuela and Iran would affect the world. And we've been seeing lately a lot of stuff going down with the invasion. I almost felt when the Iran nuke sites were taken out that this was just the overture, that Act One was to follow. And who knows what Act Two or Three will be. We may get into that tonight. But clearly, this has sent a message in no uncertain terms to China, to Russia, and even to Iran itself, given I believe that taking out the nuke sites also was the first step, unlike Obama, who just ran his mouth and turned his back on the Iranian people, some Muslim he turned out to be. But we have people in Iran are motivated, mobilized, probably like never before. And let's not forget, this is a regime that was swept to power when the Shah was removed. Later on, I want to talk about, that the Shah is not necessarily Reza Pahlavi Jr. and what his father was. He was no prince of democracy either. I will deal with that later. Marcus, would you like to elaborate on some of the stuff happening and its
Sure.
impact?
I'm going to apologize to Raul. It might be a little bit of a longer monologue than usual, but what we're witnessing is like a very seismic shift in global politics. And from the perspective of China and Russia, it's devastating because they might lose their strategic partners in Iran and Venezuela. And for a lot of people, it would just kind of go over the heads. But if you kind of flip the script, like what if the United States were to lose Canada, the United Kingdom, Germany, France, Japan, South Korea, Thailand, or even the Philippines? I mean, that would cause people to blink, maybe even pause. So, but there was a situation earlier in 2024 where Syria had a regime change, and they made overtures of shifting towards West for support. And for Iran, it affected its the Shiite crescent strategy, which encompasses Iran, Syria, and Lebanon. And for Iran, as a strategic partner with Syria, it lost an important sea and trade route, but it was also a key facility of moving and storing weapons to Hezbollah through Syria into Lebanon. And Iran, as a regional player in the Middle East, it lost parity with Saudi Arabia. And for Russia, it lost its only naval base, which is Tartus in the Mediterranean. But it also signaled to the West that with Russia's engagement in Ukraine, it can't fight two wars at the same time. So the potential loss of Venezuela could mean like a consequential denial of access for Iran, Cuba, China, and Russia. China provided significant fentanyl precursor ingredients. Hezbollah was allowed a significant presence where they pursue their roles as international drug traffickers. According to DEA reports, Hezbollah, through its sale of illegal drugs, arms sales, and money laundering, amounted to like $1 billion a year. And most of that was funneled back to Iran for hard currency. And that's important for them, Iran, because recently their currency has been devalued at least over 60%. And the thing about Venezuela, they provided fraudulent passports to them. Maybe fraudulent is not the right word, but when you have an implied consent of Venezuela to make passports, you get like under the Biden regime, you get unfettered illegal immigration with no vetting, no background check. So it's hard to really challenged that when you have a Hezbollah or Cuban sleeper agents coming in from Venezuela into the country. So for China, loss of Venezuela could cripple the China Belt and Road Initiative. China was the biggest contributor for Venezuela as the largest creditor and key economic partner, providing over like 105 billion since the early 2000. And in return, China receives over 80% of the country's crude oil exports. China doesn't produce any oil. So imagine if Venezuela goes west, Iran goes west, how it would affect China's economy, because energy is like the main driver in a modern economy. So if that gets impeded, that could have serious ramifications in short order or have a cascading effect. Russia and Iran are directly affected by what's happened in Venezuela. The shadow fleet, that what we've seen with what Trump has been doing, the shadow fleet undermines the G7 oil embargoes and sanctions. So one way to master oil is to mix the hard crude of Venezuela and the fine oil of Iran. And when you see that being impeded, it undermines those efforts. And what also it signals is that well, the shadow fleet wouldn't carry like a Russian flag, but what it would do is that it undermines how Russia is an unreliable strategic partner, because there was an incident where the SEALs took down an oil tanker in front of a Russian destroyer in a sub. And a little more, I don't want to like kind of stretch this for Raul, but the purpose of BRICS was to counter like the World Bank and IMF by providing economic and geopolitical coordination among its member states. It created like an economy of scale to create a parity against the West. But what it did was, it was in reality, it was China and Washington wanted to do this to unseat the U.S. hegemonic status as a superpower by challenging the dollar, by replacing with a new global currency. And the petrol currency, i.e. the US dollar, it allowed the US to export inflation to other countries, which in effect allows the US to print and spend beyond its means. If you challenge the petrodollar, it could create like a potential Zimbabwe-like inflation against the US and relegate to a third world status. With Venezuela and Iran out of the picture, the momentum of BRICS would be stalled. So I'll stop there for now.
Excellent points, all of them, and we'll go into some. We'll probably backtrack on some of those. Raul, please weigh in.
No, listen. I think what Marcus is describing is, obviously what's happened most recently in terms of, this whole alliance between Russia and Iran and China and the BRICS country and all that stuff really beginning to fall apart because of the decisive action of President Trump, not just in sort of, capturing Maduro and bringing him to U.S. justice without a single soldier, killed. But even prior to that, the fact that, he bombed the nuclear facilities of Iran, right? The U.S. is, for the first time in a long time, beginning to reassert its status as a superpower. And I think this is yet another sort of chapter, continuation of a reordering of how the world operates, that you can certainly trace it back to the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989, the disintegration of the Soviet Union in 1991, but you can even send it back a bit further to 1979 when the Ayatollah Khameini returned to Iran, the Iranian regime of the Shah of Iran fell pretty quickly. Iran became run by religious clerics. Okay, and prior to that, throughout the 60s, you had Yasser Arafat and the Palestinian Liberation Movement. He had this incredible rise of terrorism. Khomeini comes around, gets rid of the Shah of Iran, turns Iran into this incredible patron of all these terrorist groups throughout the world. And then the Soviet Union falls, right? And for most of the 90s, there was kind of this belief that, wow, the superpower, Russia, the nuclear threat against the United States is over. You recall that we had that phrase, the peace dividend, that, all this money that we were spending on nuclear weapons, we could now use it to, feed the world and make everybody, happy and prosperous, et cetera, et cetera. And, there's a saying that anytime there's a vacuum, something fills it, right? I mean, and in the case of the fall of the Soviet Union, there was a vacuum for a limited period of time. Okay, that
Agrees.
Soviet Union, like I said, followed the Berlin Wall in 1989, the disintegration of the Soviet Union in 1991, and then what happened? 2001, 9/11, right? And all of a sudden, the power of the United States, the superpower of the United States, is challenged not by the Russians, not by the Chinese, okay, but by a solitary figure hiding in a cave in the mountains of Afghanistan, right? And you see this incredible shift of power. And I think we've talked about this before. We've been for some time now in a period where the power of the sovereign state has been diminished for a lot of different reasons, right? The fact that we have this technology now that we can move money and capital and people and aircraft that can take us any place in the world in the space of a day or two, and money and technology and ideas and capitals moves freely between borders. And it's very difficult for sovereign countries to continue the same power that they used to have before, especially in the case of the Soviet Union, when you kind of implode and you lose, all of your former, states now become independent countries. So there's just been this remarkable sort of shift in the power structure of how we govern ourselves in general. And after that sort of destruction, or the fall of the Berlin Wall, fall of communism, like I said, we had a short honeymoon, and then we sort of realized, well, wait a second, our problems aren't over yet. The nuclear threat may no longer be there, but now we have, terrorism. We ended up spending 20 plus years in Iraq and Afghanistan trying to defeat terrorist groups there. And, you could say that, that didn't go very well for us. And in the meantime, you had Russia, Putin comes into power. Putin, former KGB, thought the Soviet Union was the greatest thing since sliced bread. And what's he been trying to do ever since he assumed power? He's been trying to rebuild, the USSR under a different name and reasserting their dominance. Meantime, the Chinese, suddenly enters the world stage. I think it was roughly 1989, around that same time period when Deng Xiaoping basically opened up China to the world, right? That was around 1979, if I believe. And then 1989, I think you had like Tiananmen, a brief pause there, but by the early 90s, China was once again engaged with the world. And so things have changed, right? We had this sort of bipolar world for the longest time. It was the US and the USSR. Boom. That was the big concern, right? That was the whole issue of mad, mutually assured destruction if we started lobbing nuclear weapons at each other. Suddenly, the Soviet Union falls. You're left with the U.S. as sort of the global, hegemon. But all of a sudden, Iran comes around, starts, supporting all these different proxy groups in Venezuela. At the end of the 90s, the Venezuelans legitimately elected, as far as I can tell, Chavez into power. Okay, and Carlos and I and all the rest of the Cubans were saying, "What the fuck are you guys doing, man? I mean, this guy's a freaking socialist. He's going to do the same thing to your country that Fidel Castro did to Cuba." And I remember the Venezuelans back then saying, "Oh no, that's not going to happen. I mean, come on, man. Cuba, you're a small little island country. We're a big, sophisticated country. We got 30 million people. We have oil. He's not going to ruin all that stuff." Guess what? He did. He ruined it, and then was followed by his protege, Nicolas Maduro, that finished the job and turned it into a complete narco state. Okay. And all this time, the U.S. is licking its wounds from Iran and Afghanistan. And oh my God, we're back in this, long, war. And the American people are tiring of it. And we no longer have our status. And the peace dividend is over. And guess what happened the last few years? Donald Trump comes into the scene. And Donald Trump is the proverbial bull in the china shop. He starts breaking shit, spouting off, saying exactly what he thinks. And what does he think? He wants to make America great again, And part of making America great again is not just rebuilding our economy that Democrats have destroyed for decades now, but also rebuilding our military might, rebuilding the fact that, having a United States passport means something. Don't screw with an American, okay? That's important. And so I think that what we're seeing right now is basically the realization that, we live in a world in which, or we've been living in a world where we the sovereign states, particularly the United States, has played by the rules, right? We have tried to sort of, resolve problems through diplomacy, through through international institutions like, the feckless United Nations. Meantime, Russia and Iran and Venezuela and all these bad actors have been, using shadow fleets of oil tankers, proxies, terrorists, all this stuff. What Marcus was alluding to, the nexus between Iran and Venezuela was a serious one, man. I've been reading that they've been assembling Shahed drones, in Venezuela, and then shipping them off to Russia. Okay. America still has a ton of enemies, okay? But, the way Putin has been playing it is, we don't want a direct confrontation with the United States because, they also have nuclear weapons, okay? And they can hurt us. China is appearing on the scene. They don't want to really confront the U.S. either. But, there's been all this sort of proxy warfare and, I'm going to screw you over this way in the dark of night, and I'm going to, use a shadow fleet to move oil around, even though you have sanctions on me. And, the Biden administration, what did it do? It huffed and it puffed and it complained, but it didn't do shit. Okay. And it continued and it got worse. And now it's in a complete revolution, as Marcus alluded to. Everything is being, it's like a domino table, we're all the features now, you're sort of like, you're moving them around on the domino table. Getting ready to play again. That's what's going on right now.
I'd like to elaborate on the things that I've been picking up listening to both of you. And I was in college, and I remember when the Iranian Revolution occurred, there were Iranian students here. They were the well-to-do, obviously. They could afford to come to America. And they were demonstrating on the campuses, and they would get into shouting matches, particularly with the Jewish students. But they were talking about death to the Shah, that he was a puppet of Jimmy Carter, et cetera, et cetera. Let's not forget that the Shah of Iran was better than what they got later, just like Batista and Fidel Castro. But the Shah was running a monarchy and kept in place with a brutal police state. I don't remember, I don't speak Farsi, but I know that I do remember the acronym, Savat. That was a secret police, and they did delightful things like putting people on a giant griddle as if they were human waffles, immobilizing them and cooking them. So this isn't some pushover regime. And I only mention that because if they're trying to bring back his son, hopefully the son is more intelligent. Now with the what we've been doing, and yes, thankless UN, and yes, the thankless EU, but those were enabled and allowed and coddled by feckless American presidents. Bill Clinton, Obama, he gets out the first week, runs around on a world fucking apology tour. At times, America's been arrogant, you know. That only enabled it. And I see why Putin said that the greatest tragedy of the 20th century was the collapse of the Soviet Union. But let's be real, Putin has been jerking off American presidents since what, W? At least, and he's still there. What we're doing now, I think it was high time, long overdue, and that is blocking, taking away, like you said, Raul, the octopus doesn't have the balls to face our octopus because our octopus can eat their octopus. So what did they do? They sent the tentacles out. We're going to get Al Shabaab. We're going to get Hezbollah. We're going to get Al Qaeda. We're going to get ISIS. They're going to fight for us. Well, we've been lopping off those tentacles, and also the fact that they never thought we would attack directly. The U.S. will never do that. That's a violation of sovereignty. Well, you know what? Fuck their sovereignty. If you're using your country as a base for war, and we need to do it in a more intelligent way, and I think that's where Trump is playing 3D chess. That we're not going to get bogged down, boots on the ground. I think in the next few days, and a little later, I want to deal with the instability that is still Venezuela. This idea that because we got Nicky Boy here in custody and his wife, that Venezuela is a stable U.S. ally now is a fantasy. It is by no means that. And we're going to see how smart Delcy Rodriguez is and how she proceeds. But as long as she and that Diosdado guy is still there, and what's his name, Saab, Jorge Saab, is it? The money laundering guy, as long as those people are there, Venezuela, and they're cracking down on people that want to demonstrate. You see Venezuelans worldwide jubilantly cheering in the streets, celebrating, as we would do if the regime in Cuba fell. But in Venezuela, they can't do it because, and I was reading that the other night, just last night, they were talking about Trump's abuses and all this stuff with Minneapolis. Not a word was said about the Iranian people fighting for their freedom by all those Golden Globes assholes. Not a word was said. So that's what I'm seeing, and it's it's get out the popcorn. I just what's going to be next. Marcus, please continue.
One thing, going back on what you said about Iran under Shah, kind of like a brutal dictatorship, I would kind of in part disagree because like I said, you have to take it in perspective in that culture, in that region, because what he tried to do was democratize that country with liberal policies. I mean, if you look at pictures before the overthrow, there was women in miniskirts and discos. Yeah. But you get the clerics who opposed any change to Islamic values, and then you get like the students. Some of them were, a number of them were Marxists, but you get that alignment of the two groups to kind of help overthrow the Shah. And the thing is, in any Middle Eastern country, whether it's Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Qatar, they handle any religious extremists with lethal precision. So, because it's like a cancer, if you let it fester, it'll metastasize into a cancer. Look at what happened in Venezuela. It metastasized into a big tumor in South America. But kind of going back about like Iran, if there's a fall of Iran, what it also would be a devastating blow to the axis of resistance, which comprised of Hezbollah, Hamas, the Iraqi militia, what used to be Syria, which is defunct, in the Houthis. So without Iran as a backer and proactive partner of arms and money, these Shiite jihadists in those regions would either be hampered or withered on a vine, or morph into a drug cartel like Hezbollah, or find common ground with Sunni jihadists in Afghanistan or Libya. So my take is that the reconstruction of Iran once it installs a monarchy, it would take a lot of years. But what in the end it would provide more stability and peace in the Middle East than it did in the past century. Also, like the Strait of Hormuz would not be a potential choke point for Iran, so the price of oil would precipitously drop. And for Russia, how it would affect a loss of Iran, the regime change would also mean like losing a foothold in the Middle East completely. So there was a loss of control over any oil, disrupt the supply of Shahed drones to Russia, and correspondingly weaken Russia's global standing. The Shahed drones are usually sent directly to Ukraine to balance out the conflict there. So without those drones, it could tip the scale more towards Ukraine or for a better peace settlement. And then you look at the Houthis in Yemen. Without the missiles or drones provided by Iran, it would prevent their ability to create havoc within the sphere of influence, even though they could get missiles in China. But I'm sure China is going to take a very pregnant pause with that. But another thing about how it affects in terms of strategic partnerships is that coming from like military analysts, like the Iranian, the Chinese, the Russian military hardware, primarily like the air defense systems, tanks, naval ships, and subs, it shows that it cannot compare to Western technology. Ukrainian drones attack deep into Mother Russia. As Raul mentioned, U.S. destroyed Iranian nuclear facilities. And then recently, they did a snatch and grab of a Venezuelan president in a military base. So if I was a potential customer, would I invest in a second-rate product?
Yeah. Well, China and Russia were badly exposed. Their technology was shown. I remember the first Iraq war. Remember in '91, the Scuds that were duds. I was reminded of that. The other thing too with Iran, right now they're cracking down brutally. I don't think it's 400 people. I think it could be, God help us, in the thousands that they're killing over there. Something's going to have to be done because they don't have the weaponry. Now, I understand that the Iranian military, the basic military, is not the IRGC, and they don't like each other. And I believe that military, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they outnumber the IRGC. But that's an internal struggle that they're having. It's ironic too that when I was back in the university, there were the privileged, in Spanish we say hijo de mamá y de papá, no, mommy and daddy's boys and girls. That were the well-to-do studying here from Iran. And Iranians are Persian; they're not Arabs. It's easy to forget that. Right now, we're seeing mosques being burned to the ground in Iran, in different cities in Iran. Mosques, not churches, not temples, mosques. So clearly, this idea that there's a universal fervor and demand and support of Islam, which I have said many times, and I'll say it right now: Islam is a cancer. As long as there's communism and Islam on the earth, there will never be world peace. And I stand behind that. I wish it was wrong. I'd love to one day say, damn, I was so wrong. But I have yet to see anything to prove me otherwise.
Yeah. Listen, I think to Marcus's point, I mean, yes, this what we've seen also in the last couple of weeks is really how powerless and how ineffective most of the Russian and Chinese hardware that is out there is. Okay, their anti-aircraft batteries, may have worked really well, in the wide open spaces of Russia, but in mountainous terrain like in and around Caracas, there's all sorts of different ways to, use that terrain to destroy those sites. Apparently, it uses a very powerful radar that is itself problematic because it becomes a target for anti-radiation missiles. The Chinese radars apparently didn't work that well either, and the Venezuelan military. Man, I saw a photograph of the Venezuelan generals. all like, decked out. I shit you not, man. They were like in brand spanking new uniforms with chest rigs. If you did
Yeah.
the blow up of the pictures, you could tell the buckles were like, like brand spanking new. Okay. The helmets, the gear, chest holsters, the whole bit. And there's a phrase in Spanish, postalitas. I mean, they just look like freaking clowns, man. I mean,
Chapita for all the medals.
huh?
And the way in Spanish, chapita is a bottle cap. For those
Yeah,
of you
yeah.
who don't know,
I mean, they're just like ridiculous, man. I mean, these guys aren't really soldiers. They're playing the role of soldiers, right? And you guys know this, and Marcus certainly knows this. I mean, I never served in the U.S. military because I am, for all practical purposes, blind in one eye. But I've gotten to know them really well because after 9/11, I spent like 2 decades, doing lots of stuff in support of the military. And the one thing that I've learned over those past 20, 25 years is, and it's not just a tagline, it is not the hardware. Okay. It is the people, that we have in our military that make it so great. Okay. For a variety of different reasons. I mean, you can build aircraft carriers, you can build destroyers, right? But what Russia doesn't have, what China doesn't have, certainly what the Koreans don't have, okay, the North Koreans, and even the Chinese military at this point, okay, they don't have anywhere the experience and the institutional knowledge that we have to how to train, mobilize, repair, maintain, rotate all of these assets in a coordinated fashion.
Logistics.
I mean, the reason that all these Latin American countries buy all this hardware and it ends up being worthless is because they can't maintain it. They don't have they haven't done this stuff, right? And the easy stuff is buying shit and building radars and sophisticated weaponry. But if you don't back it up with people that understand how to use it and how to employ it and maintain it and everything else, it's all worthless at the end of the day. And also, when you look at, you talk about this raid, okay, the tier 1 unit, so-called Delta Force, the unit, whatever you want to call it. I mean, Marcus, and you can talk to this as well, man. I mean, the trigger time that these guys shoot like unlimited amounts of ammo. Okay. The world is their oyster, right? I mean, they can shoot all friggin' day long for months on end. Okay. After a while, there is just such a muscle memory built in. I had, I think it was probably about 10 years ago at Fort Bragg, and we were at range 37, and there's a big shoot house there, and we got to see, the famed Delta team, clear that building. Dude, man, I mean, that shit happened so fast. It was like unbelievable, right? Just unbelievable, the speed in which they did it, right? And and then afterwards talking to them, and by the way, they weren't all like, 25, young guys. These are like 35 going on 40 guys. Some of them had a little bit of a punch. But they've been doing this shit for 10, 15 years, man, snatching people in the middle of the night, shooting people in the face. It becomes like fucking, it's like you and I going out to like 7-Eleven to pick up some milk or something, right? It's just like, that's what we do, Marcus, I don't know if you can tell us about your SEAL experience.
But the thing about tactics, they change over time, but they're combat tested.
Yeah.
So going back about the CQB element you're talking about, we were trained to flood and kind of overwhelm a room, but that's for like high tempo, high value subjects like a hostage rescue. So what they learn in Afghanistan and Iraq is that they were doing these hostage rescue type of tactics coming in fast when they would encounter somebody with a what was it, RKD machine gun in a hallway. and they're going in a fatal funnel, and then they're taking casualties unnecessarily. So with combat tested tactics, they're learning, like, if it's not a high value, if not time sensitive, what they would do is call it cutting the pie, where they just kind of go in, but not expose themselves, using cover and concealment to take out a target, then come in. So, but the thing is, with Venezuela and Cuba, they haven't been battle tested. They don't know. I mean, they can watch a video about tactics, but if they don't have the necessary trigger time, and the thing about, like, bullets.
And they went in there at 1 o'clock in the morning. They knew the schedules of the soldiers. Okay. And by the way, and this is not being reported that often, and I want to mention it. Okay.
Yeah.
I've been following this very closely, listening to a lot of news from Venezuelans, people, former Venezuelan military leaders, intel people, anti-corruption activists that have been following, Chavez and Maduro for years. And, I was watching one of these fellows who basically, he's well known for, tracking what's been going on in Venezuela with Maduro and Chavez. And he's also apparently been extremely helpful as a Venezuelan, helping U.S. law enforcement, snatch bad guys and pointing them out to them and giving them a lot of intel. And this guy came out in an interview that he did with a Venezuelan journalist and said unequivocally, and given his background, because I did some research on the guy, he appears to be legit. Okay, he's been around for a while, and this reporter is very well known as well. He basically said, look, the person that turned in Maduro is Delcy Rodriguez, the vice president who's now in power. She was the one who told her CIA agent exactly when and where to get Maduro, right? I mean, where he was most vulnerable. And so she's now running the country. She's doing saber rattling and saying, oh, we need to get this guy back. And this guy said unequivocally, that's friggin' kabuki theater, man. That's the woman who turned him in. And oh, by the way, okay, prior to becoming an agent for the CIA, she has spent most of her life as an asset of the Russian KGB. So what you're dealing with now in Venezuela is this, like, incredible sort of house or hall of mirrors, and I think the U.S. was right to just go in, snatch them, get out, okay, not get involved, because these guys are going to end up, killing each other. Let them all pull out the knives. Let the internal, struggles happen, okay, and keep reevaluating, and keep putting pressure selectively, when needed. I think Delcy Rodriguez knows damn well that if she doesn't follow the rules as given to her by Trump, okay, she can say whatever she wants to appease the public and appear to be, a Venezuelan nationalist, but she better turn over that oil. She better cooperate, because if not, she will disappear in the middle of the night. And this guy, Diosdado Cabello, the Interior Ministry, who's now saying he's going to start this guerrilla warfare in the mountains, that's just a freaking jerk, man. That guy is not long for this world. I predict he'll be gone probably by Valentine's Day.
Let me mention, among the riches of ironies, Diosdado, for those of you who don't habla, it means God given. That's like God has a sense of humor, doesn't he? And the names that sometimes people have them bestowed upon them. Another thing that China and Russia and any of those countries don't have, that's, to me, those are the new axes of evil. They don't have a volunteer military. They have conscripts. The greatest frequent search in Russia was what? How to break your own arm. Remember? By young men. That was the number one internet search. So they don't have that either. And that is morale. Our own military's morale had really, I'm not going to say in the dump, but it has suffered a huge blow under Biden.
Yeah.
And I remember the night that was announced, it must have been about 1 a.m. when they announced that Trump was the president. Indeed, no more hemming and hawing. The VMI barracks exploded in cheers. So those young men who probably had to be up at 4 or whenever it is those guys get up, were staying up just to hear that. that to me spoke volumes.
Yeah.
The morale of the military.
Yeah.
The other thing with
By the
what's
way,
going on.
I think the only serious military powers left in the world, today are really the U.S. and the IDF. Those are the undisputed champions of the world. I think everybody else is a distant second or third. You can have a lot of people, you can have a lot of guns, you can have a lot of ships, but the ability to project military force effectively and use it to change circumstances is really kind of limited to, in my mind, those two countries. I mean, Great Britain's become a joke. The Germans are worthless. Poland is going to be the salvation of Eastern Europe. Okay, Italy, believe it or not, Melania, is what's her name? Melania Maloney, whatever. She's great. She's kind of like taking a hard line and fixing things in Italy, and Hungary's doing all right. But the Western European states, Spain is worthless. The French are worthless. Okay. I would be very concerned if I was living in Europe and expecting that, I was going to be defended from the Russian bear is kind of silly, right? But they're lucky because Ukraine has been the surrogate and has absorbed all the body blows and has caused enormous damage to the Russian war machine. I mean, did you guys see those photos the other days of the Russians on horseback, for Christ's sakes? I mean, that's like unbelievable, right? I mean, they're out of tanks, they're out of trucks, they're out of bicycles, they're out of motorbikes, okay? So now they've resorted to like cavalry, right? It's like, what the fuck is this mess? The 21st century, and you're so low on armored vehicles that you're forced to use like horses, okay? And you see the Ukrainian drone operators, they don't want to kill the horse, they want to kill the person on the horse. So what they do is they just continually bob them until the horse throws the guy off, and then the drone goes and kills the soldier, and the horse, trots off happily ever after. That's what they're trying to do. But it's just insane, man. I mean, they've caused enormous damage to Russia. And listen, apparently there have been a couple of death threats against, Putin. That guy's got to be looking over his shoulder all the time. If and when Ukraine gets, long-range weapons, who the hell knows? They might make Putin a target. They've certainly made Zelensky a target on several occasions. So maybe it's time to return the favor.
Let's not forget also, getting back to Venezuela, we talked about the casualties of the soldiers. Those were not Venezuelan soldiers. Those were Cuban soldiers. The 31 martyrs, okay, from Cuba.
I think there might have been more, man. I think that 32 number is just a number they pulled out of their ass. It could be probably double or triple that.
That's nothing new as far as Chavez had Cuban protection, surgeons, whatever, however in vain to save his life. They don't trust their own people. The Venezuelan despotic regime does not and cannot trust its own people. So they have Cuban security, which turned out to be about as effective as Chinese weaponry. And there's also, do you guys know anything about Marcus? This might be more in your wheelhouse. The supposed new sonic weapon that I started bleeding from my nose or whatever. I found like my innards were blown out. The night of the assault, the testimony from some of the guards or whatever, the security force that lived to tell the tale.
You know what? I'm 20 years removed from the military, so I'm kind of out of touch. But I'm kind of thinking back on our last topic discussion about Venezuela. We didn't predict a snatch and grab. We predict like a 50 million bounty would cause an internal revolution, but we were wrong, and it shows how bold the Trump administration would do to get the job done, which has an effect worldwide. I mean, especially in Latin American country, like Colombia and Brazil used to be boisterous. Now they're very subdued in their messaging.
So Sheinbaum in Mexico.
Yeah.
They're all making deals. I wanted to ask you also with regard to everything going on, going again back to Venezuela, what do you guys, you were saying, Raul, and I think a lot of that is probably what's going to happen. She's saber rattling, she's saying the right things for the domestic audience, but when would they be having elections, and do we think she has to know she'll be voted out? She has to know she'll be
Yeah,
voted
look,
out.
I think elections, or actually, they already have an elected leader. Her name is Maria Corina Machado, and Edmundo Gonzalez, who ran for the Vente Venezuela party and beat Maduro. And I think a lot of Western countries have recognized her as the legitimately elected president of Venezuela. But she has a problem. Number one, that Trump is not ready to put her, pull her out of the bullpen and put her in there.
He
And I
said
think rightly so, because she's a very polarizing figure, particularly amongst, the Venezuelan military, and she would have a hard time. She doesn't have like a lot of like military people that have supported her over the years, or she hasn't been able to show that she has, how would I describe it? Sort of el peso. She doesn't have the weight to sort of go in there and really exert influence and power. And I think she's going to end up meeting with Trump apparently this weekend or something. And I think eventually what you're going to see over the next couple of months is I think that they'll continue kind of monitoring this and seeing how it shakes out and who kills who and who ends up at the top. And if it's somebody they don't like, then we'll deal with it then. But I think there's going to be a period of time, and it's probably going to be, I don't know, maybe 6 months or so, to kind of like let the dust settle and see what happens. And I think the U.S. will be, very selectively, pulling levers here and there, or maybe, snatching people here and there, making people disappear here and there, to kind of influence the outcome. And I think once that there's some sort of stability, reasserted in the country, and maybe it's Delcy Rodriguez, maybe it's somebody else who starts really, and the military decides, listen, we can't beat them, we may as well join them, and Diosdado Cabello, is liquidated. Then maybe there's an opportunity to say, okay, let's bring in Maria Corina and Edmundo as the provisional government, and then let's have elections again, so that we can have a very transparent national election, and we can create longer term stability in the country. I think getting the oil industry up and running is going to take much longer than people expect.
Yeah.
That's not going to be an easy exercise. The country itself, and you saw this in the news the other day, Exxon saying that, they're not ready to invest in Venezuela. Well, hell, I don't think anybody is, because, right now we don't really know who's in control, who's calling the shots, what's going to happen. Would you go into that environment, that chaotic environment right now? No. There's a lot of money on the sidelines and a lot of money to be made, and Trump can jawbone it all he wants, but until the conditions are right for security or some sort of more secure environment, big oil isn't going to start pouring, billions of dollars into a country that could, end up in a civil war or something, right? That would be dumb. So, but I think we'll eventually get there, and I think you have an incredible pool of talented, Venezuelans living here in the U.S. and in other countries. Many of them petroleum engineers that helped build, PDVSA and the oil industry in Venezuela. That had their property seized, that had to come here and are anxious to get back and start rebuilding the country. Look, Venezuela is blessed, man. It's a huge country, 30 million people. They have, the largest, oil reserves in the world. They have hydroelectric energy. They have fisheries. They have, arable, land, agricultural land.
Gold, minerals.
All sorts of, they have bauxite, they have iron ore, they have copper, they have all sorts of stuff, man. You talk about, Venezuela should absolutely be a powerhouse country, okay? And it was a powerhouse for the longest time, until, the right-wing governments and politicians started lining their pockets a little bit too much. Okay, and people got the electorate got pissed off and took a gamble on Hugo Chavez because they were so pissed at being robbed blind by their own leaders. But Venezuela is a country with enormous potential, and I think there's a bright future there, or at least there's a chance of a bright future, just like Iran, man. I mean, I remember years ago seeing a frontline documentary. It was like several episodes. Like I think the guy who was doing it was produced by the guy who was a New York Times correspondent living in Tehran when he did the series. And man, it was a real eye opener because it's what I've always suspected. It's a really modern country, sophisticated. You look at their roads and their downtowns and their office buildings. It could be any major metropolitan city in America, right? This is not Neanderthal Afghan tribes people, right? I mean, these are middle class people, bright, intelligent, doctors, nurses, well educated, and like you alluded to also, Carlos, the Persian Empire. Holy shit, man! I mean, what they've contributed, over millenniums to human progress, and is like unbelievable, right? I mean, one of the great fountains of culture and knowledge in the world.
Well, looking at the impact that they've made in America, just looking through my little tunnel, my little toilet paper roll in my profession, when I was practicing, when I was in school, the amount of faculty and students that were from Iran in the dental profession, and I'm sure that it's the same would be said for the medical, was astounding. We had them and Asians, Koreans, Taiwan. USC was chock full of all those. We had some of the best professors were from
the Western world doesn't have a monopoly on knowledge or talented people, right? There's incredible doctors and physicians from all over the world, some of the best, in fact, and I'm sure Iran has its fair share as well, right? I mean, they obviously have a hell of a lot of nuclear physicists, although I think big chunk of those are probably now dead or have fled the country or are in hiding someplace. But they have the sophistication to come close to building nuclear weapons. So
it's important. My cardiologist in Miami was from El Salvador. My cardiologist here is Indonesian. My wife's OBGYN is Jamaican. Okay,
great. I think it's wonderful.
Primary care is Argentine, but you would think he's Italian. He speaks flawless Italian. So there you go. I wanted to ask you, Mark.
I mean, so long as they're competent, I don't care who's working on me. So long as they're the best of the breed, right? I mean,
what is the thing denominator? They're drawn to this country. The best of the best want to come here, and that is part of what makes us the melting pot. Despite everything, we are still that, and that's who we need to import. Not just another dishwasher or potato peeler. I know somebody's got to wash the dishes, park the cars, and peel the potatoes. I get that, but not an unfettered number that are a bigger drain and that are sending all their income back to their home countries. But that's another topic for another night.
Nobody wants to migrate to Mexico, to Russia, to India. I mean,
we're all here.
People want to come here. I mean, for all of our faults, and we got a lot of faults. This country's not perfect, far from it. But man, I've had the opportunity to travel the whole friggin' world, and you go certain cultures, you say, wow, this is really cool. Wow, this is kind of neat and whatever. Man, I was always happy to come back to the U.S. and with all its warts and all its problems, it was just kind of like, this is home, man. This is home, and this is still the best country in the world. And yes, Singapore has the best airports and has, the French have, incredible food and the best fish and chips is found in London. It's about the only food that's worth eating. But every country, brings something to the equation. The Japanese, incredibly industrious. Everything's like sparkling clean. But hell, man, I'd rather be in America, and it's a little bit messy, and we got a lot of problems and issues and turmoil and tension. But this is the USA, man. This is America, right? So my country, love it or leave it.
So I wholeheartedly agree, having come from Cuba in '61. I wanted to ask you, Marcus, with regard to, since the other half of our topic tonight is Iran, do you think we're going to reach a point where the violence will either tamp down, or that Trump will have to do some decaps of, like, say, IRGC leadership, maybe even whack? I know earlier we talked about Harrison expressed that whacking Khamenei would not be good, but maybe pressuring him enough for. We thought we were going to get Chavez, Maduro, to get the fuck out of Venezuela. He was so damn stupid and arrogant that he didn't, and now he's paying for it. Like Rubio said, now he has a whole new set of problems. But
I think third party actors would get involved. You get like the IDF. You get like the first cities to fall in Iran was in the west, and they were Kurdish, and they're like the most dedicated fighters, the most patriotic. And I'm still surprised that we haven't given them a state that they could call their own. But what I would see the U.S. would do if there's mass killings is he would do selective targeting as an accelerant to foment more revolution into there. Like what happened to Libya. Libya handled all the Islamic jihadists, or the free army of Libya. But once the UN got involved, because thanks to Hillary Clinton, it tipped the scale. So I would see like it would be selective targeting, using it as an accelerant to foment the toppling. And same thing with Venezuela. If they're not playing ball, part of the tactics that the U.S. did is shutting down their electric grid. I mean, you don't have to use force. You could create accelerants to make it uncomfortable, to make people want to protest or revolt. So shutting down the electricity, shutting down the water, devaluing their currency. I mean, that's why Iran, the people revolted. It started it started in their little marketplace, because the real got devalued by 60%.
Yeah, the shopkeepers.
Yeah.
But also they shut, what you just described is what they did. The Iranian regime shut down internet, shut down cell phones, shut down, and we need to do it to them where they cannot communicate, because they're obviously terrified. Even with all the hampering and hobbling, the Iranian people have still risen up in ways that I didn't think they would do. And I'm very happy to see that they're doing it.
There's been a documented study. It takes 3.5 to 4% of the population to revolt to have that cascading effect. So what is, I don't know the population of Iran, but like whatever, 90 million. 4% of that is
3 million.
3 or 4 million to revolt. You look at the American Revolutionary War. Not everybody was for a revolution. You got people going for the crown and people who didn't want to get involved. But it took that small, determined group to offset England. So we shall see on that.
By the way, as you guys were talking, I mean, I just looked at my cell phone. I mean, basically, I think you're going to see something in Iran in the next 48 to 72 hours. Okay, Trump has basically said, help is on the way, right? He's told Americans to get the hell out of Iran. He's stopped talking to the Iranians.
Ignoring China.
Yeah, and well, he ignored Russia and sees that as you mentioned, Marcus, that ship in the middle of the ocean that had reclassified itself as a Russian vessel. I mean, he's kind of, to a certain extent, he's challenging Russia and challenging China and saying, what are you guys going to do about it, right? What are you going to do about it, right? So, and I think it's extremely frustrating because they really can't do a whole lot about it, right? So, at least not right this moment. The Iranians certainly can't do anything. So they got to make a decision, man. I mean, do we save our own hides, or do we end up being the ones, facing, justice, right? So I don't know, but I get the distinct sense, just seeing, this is amazing about Trump, right? I mean, most presidents before, were tight-lipped and, wouldn't say anything. And I mean, Trump just like puts it out there saying, hey, get those Americans out of there. And I'm sick and tired of dealing with you guys. And, hold on, help is on the way. I mean, come on, man. It's like you're telling these guys what the hell is going on.
So what world leaders are looking at, he's a man of action, not just words and rhetoric. So whenever Trump says something, now they're taking like a serious contemplation. Is he serious? Because now, that snatch and grab was epic.
Yeah.
That was a huge departure from Obama's famous red line that didn't mean jack shit, or John Kerry saying, well, they shouldn't. And then, of course, Joe Biden, don't. What would you say? Don't. Yeah. Empty words. Trump may be whatever. He may be a jerk. He may be a jackass, but he ain't a paper tiger.
No, man. And listen, to me, I think of, walk softly and carry a big stick. This guy has not only carried the big stick, he's now beat several people over the head with it. Okay. And luckily there's some people that are kind of like figuring that out. And I thought it was brilliant. Petro.
I think you froze up there.
He's frozen.
Okay. In Chile, they just elected, they got rid of they're bringing in a new conservative, candidate in Chile to sort of clean things up. The world continues to change, but Petro, apparently is now going to come talk to Trump in February. Yeah. And Trump announced it and said, hey, this guy that I told him to watch his ass, okay, literally that's what he told him, you ought to watch his ass. Guess what? The guy's coming to DC, okay? And by the way, he's a friggin' freak, man. That guy, it's just I don't know how the Colombians elected him.
He's MSK 13.
He's like a real freak, man. I mean, he was spotted on the streets of Panama, like with his mistress, who's like this, 6'5", trans guy. It's just like this guy's just a friggin' nutcase, right? I mean,
look at Nicaragua. They keep electing Daniel. What the fuck is Daniel Ortega still doing in power in Nicaragua? What the fuck is wrong with those people?
Yeah. So
well, with Venezuela out of the election rigging, it might be people in worldwide might get fair elections now.
Maybe, yeah. I have a colleague who's Nicaraguan, and he goes down there for banking, and I always tell her, whenever your husband's going to Nicaragua, do you worry? And she said, yeah, I do. I know he's got to go. It's his job, but I'm not crazy about it.
Yeah.
I think what would be good to talk about next is like what's going to affect what's going to be like the next 10, 20 years if there's a regime change in Iran and Venezuela. I mean, for me, I see that reconstruction with Iran and Venezuela would probably take a decade or two, but I would say within 10 years, with the amount of Western reinvestment, the people in those two countries would finally know prosperity. I would see the price of gas and oil would be a lot cheaper.
Yes.
And then consequently, the cost of goods would be globally cheaper.
Yeah.
I would see a stronger chance of peace in the Middle East because you're not getting the regional superpower conflict between Iran and versus Saudi Arabia. I would see like the regional governments around the world. I would see a shift towards a deeper economic security intelligence ties with the U.S., further isolating China and Russia. I would see that the Russian war with Ukraine would end with an embarrassing defeat for Putin, and that could end his regime. I would also see like Cuba would be the next country to fall, within 2 years, and after that, I think the focus of the shift would deal with like rogue state of Afghanistan and Libya, along with the drug cartels of Mexico and Colombia.
So who pushes Putin out? When the shit hits the fan, when the time has come, who pushes Vladimir out the door?
It'll be within Russia. Somebody would take him out.
The oligarchs?
I,
Yeah.
Bernie,
I,
the people Bernie calls the millionaires and billionaires and millionaires.
I don't know who that's going to be, but that would be a big sea change, and I have absolutely no idea who's there to fill in his shoes, right? So,
And as we're getting ready to wrap things up for tonight, I wanted to ask you guys for the moment a rhetorical question that perhaps could it be, and what I'm seeing and I'm hearing it from people, that Marco Rubio, who's certainly become a multitask rock star, could he be upstaging JD Vance? Stay tuned.
yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, don't you guys think that's a good topic for maybe
Yeah.
in the near future, or at least to bring it in as one of our discussions?
Yeah, man. No, look, they keep giving him assignments. He keeps shining at them, and think about it. JD Vance has been strangely absent for
Yes.
several weeks now. I think the other day he came out. I saw him for the very first time talking about Renee Good and that type of stuff. He was addressing that, and he was up there and he's very, strongly saying, "Oh, the administration supports law enforcement." But I'm thinking to myself, man, this is the first time I've seen him in quite some time. I mean, he's been awfully quiet, right? I mean, this is the heir apparent, and I haven't seen the heir apparent standing with Trump and Hegseth talking about Venezuela. I've seen Marco Rubio there.
Always
So,
always there.
yeah. So, I think that says a lot. I think you're going to see a shakeup, man, in this administration. I think Trump is going to replace certain. I don't think he's going to replace JD Vance. I mean, I think that he's still the golden boy, rightly or wrongly. But I think Trump likes the idea of, maybe having some competition with Marco Rubio, right? I mean, opening it up, letting JD Vance know that, hey, yours is not necessarily going to be a cakewalk, but I think there's reports, that I don't know if you believe it, that might just be BS from the liberal media, that Trump is not particularly happy with Pam Bondi. I'm not particularly happy with Pam Bondi.
Neither am I. Murtash Patel. I'm not happy with either of them.
So I think you might see some changes with the administration in this year. I think you might see him say, and I don't think he's going to just like fire these people, but I think you may see Pam Bondi coming to the microphone and saying, "Hey, you know what? It's been a very stressful job. I've enjoyed working. I need to spend more time with my family. The president's great. I love this guy. He's understands, my situation, and I wish him the best of luck," type of stuff, right? It's going to be they'll be pushed out gently, I think.
Exactly.
Unlike Powell, right? Unlike
The idea about Rubio upstarting JD Vance, I look at it in this one sense that one, there should be one is like for the good of the party, there shouldn't be any division or rift, and number two, there is like the concept of waiting your turn.
Yeah.
It's a case of musical chairs. If it's going to be a JD Vance run, it'll be a Marco Rubio president, just to give Marco Rubio more credence and bona fide and credibility for when he runs for president. So, my take would be JD Vance, Rubio, then Rubio, DeSantis, and DeSantis.
Yeah. You know what? I think Trump already is saying, he would never say this out loud. I fucked up. I should have picked Marco as a running mate, but now I'm stuck with Vance. And I think that Rubio has said recently, that he will not challenge JD Vance. Everybody's talking about the shit show Star Wars Cafe that the Democratic debates are going to be in 28, and they're going to be fucking hilarious. Let's face it, they're going to be
in our
debate situation.
And the thing is, in our very earliest podcasts, I think it's with Christine Balling, everyone agreed that Marco Rubio wasn't ready as a presidential candidate, and it showed.
Yeah.
But his experience as Secretary of State, he matured.
No
Yes.
question about it. No question about it.
And,
By the way, speaking of Marco Rubio, you know, he's a parishioner at my church down here in South Florida.
How about
And
that?
not this past Sunday, but the Sunday before last, you know, when he walked in the church, he got a standing ovation, you know, which is rather unusual, right? I mean, everybody's there to, you know, for a different reason, and they saw Marco Rubio walking in, and obviously a big, you know, Latin contingent of in the church, and people just stood up and started clapping, and you know, the guy kind of like very sheepishly, you know, found his seat, you know, with his wife, and you know, sat down. But you know, he's become quite the darling down here.
Did they start saying Marquito, Marquito? Did they do that?
I wasn't there. It was, you know, it was a 5 o'clock service, and I had gone to the 10 a.m. one, so I missed it.
Which was little Marco, but not in a derogatory term. That it's in an affectionate term. When they say Marquito, it isn't like Trump when he was deriding him saying little Marco. It's the other way around, you know. So listen, guys, it's been a very eventful and topic-filled night, this episode tonight, and there's obviously a lot of stuff happening. I think some good things are happening, and before we end off, I just want to go clockwise and see if anybody has a parting thought. Marcus, go ahead, please.
because of the fast, I appreciate eating.
I think when we next meet, the Iranian government will no longer be in place, according to Trump's own Twitter messages and stuff.
Well, with that, we will leave you all tonight from your ears to, in this case, I'll say from your ears to Allah, since it is His will that they worship. Everybody, thank you for joining us tonight. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you like what you're hearing. And we bid you good night.